Previously on Lost.
I found fresh water. It's up in the valley, and we'll get water. But if you don't do that, we're going to have to find out, find some other way to contribute. Because if we can't live together, then we're going to die alone. This video is part 5 of Lost. It is the episode entitled House of the Rising Sun. At the very beginning of the episode, you see everyone on the beach, and immediately there's a flashback, and you see Sun at some sort of like high society party. She's all dressed up and has her hair pulled back, and a waiter offers her some champagne. You see that it's gin. The very next scene is that they're talking to each other, and you realize that they know one another, and they kiss, and he's basically telling her he wants to marry her, and he's going to have to ask her father's permission. Back to the scene on the beach. Suddenly, Jin takes off, because Michael and Walter, off, and he starts attacking Michael and fighting him and, punching him, and Walt's, telling him, get off, and Sun's like, and I don't know what she was saying, because, anyways, basically, they're fighting, and no one really knows why. Well, Sawyer and Saeed come and break up the fight, and Saeed says to Sawyer, get the handcuffs from the air marshal that was after Kate. So they chain him to the wreckage, and Sun's feeling sorry for him and standing by him, and Saeed's like, surely there must have been something to provoke him. And Michael's like, I didn't do anything. And then Sun's like, pointing, she's like, and she's pointing at her wrist. And basically what she's saying is that Michael has this watch on. You find out later in the episode that it actually belonged to Jin. This entire time since the beginning, Charlie has been sneaking off and doing his heroin. It was the last bit of heroin he brought with him on the plane. It was the reason he went with Kate and Jack to the cockpit, because he remembered he hid it in the bathroom in the front of the plane just before the plane crashed. And so he goes with Jack and Kate and Locke to gather water from the spring that's in the caves. Charlie goes outside to do his drugs, and just as he's about to open the little baggie that it's in, Locke comes from around the tree. He's like, don't move. He quickly sticks the drugs in his pocket, and he's like, hey, can I have some privacy? And Locke's like, don't move at all. And then Kate and Jack are like, what's going on? He's like, he's standing on a beehive. We got to find something to cover it. And Charlie's like, no, I have an irrational fear of bees. Jack goes to get a suitcase and tries to cover it with it, but just before that, he smashes it, and then all of a sudden there's all these bees everywhere, and chases them all away. Back at the beach, there's a flashback where you see Jin walks up from a building and basically tells Sun that he got permission from her father to marry her, and he gives her a ring. It's not quite that enormous, but you get the point. This entire time, while I've been saying Sun says, Jin says, blah, 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 they're all speaking, they're both speaking in Korean, and subtitles come up, as they're speaking. Well, in the next flashback, Jin gives Sun a dog, basically, I guess, because, he's working for her father now. It was one of the agreements to be able to marry her, and she says to him, remember when all it took to make me happy was you to give me a flower? In the very beginning scene when they were at the party, he gave her a white orchid. Jack and Kate, the reason that they all went to the caves to get water, and then they're ready to take the water back, Charlie and Locke agree to stay behind because there's some wreckage in the caves, and they're going to go through it to see if there's anything of use. Well, while Kate and Jack are walking through the jungle, Jack is basically telling Kate that, the caves are too good a shelter to let them go to waste, and walking back and forth a mile and a half or however long it's going to be every day for 46 people to have water is just crazy. So he's telling her we should move from the beach where we're at and move everyone, to the cave. And she's like, well, yeah, it makes sense, but, you haven't convinced me. In another flashback, Jin, he comes home suddenly and then runs off into the bathroom, and she's like, like, what happened? Oh my gosh, what's going on? She follows him in there, and she sees that, like, he's got, like, blood, like, all over him, and he's, like, trying to wash his hands in the sink, and she's like, what's going on? What happened? Are you hurt? And he turns around and is like, I do whatever it takes so that we can stay married. I do what your father tells me. And she's just, like, in disbelief, and then just kind of quietly exits the bathroom. In the next flashback, a woman posing to be a decorator for Sun and Jin's apartment comes, and they kind of go into the bedroom because Jin's on the phone, and basically you find out that this woman really isn't a decorator at all. She's helping Sun escape to somewhere. The woman tells her, like, for the first week they'll think you're kidnapped, and then when they think you're dead, you'll be free to move wherever you want. When you go to the airport at 11:15, you'll make an excuse to leave the airport. There'll be a car waiting, and that's when you'll make your getaway. Oh, I almost forgot. The scene with the decorator lady, she mentions to Sun, like, okay, you've taken all of your lessons, and that's going to play a major part in the next scene after this. And she was like, yeah, I took my lessons. Well, she's at the airport, and she sees that it's 11:15, and it's, like, time to go. The car's, like, out waiting. And she, like, inches away, but as she looks back at Jin, who's waiting in line for the the ticket counter. Side note, Jack is, like, right up here talking to this lady, talking about, I need to get the coffin on the plane. Anyways, he shows her a white orchid, and then she's, like, all, like, upset. And then she comes and joins him in line, and she's all crying, and he says, like, well, what's the matter? And she says, oh, it's too beautiful. Well, basically, Jack and Kate make it back to camp, and Saeed tells them that, like, okay, there's something that happened, and blah, 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 blah. Jack's trying to convince everyone to move to the caves. There's all this talk about who's going to go and who's not. Sun tracks down Michael, who now is, like, chopping bamboo, I guess, for firewood. And she comes to him, and this is, like, one of the first big shocks, besides the monster, in Lost. And she says, in plain English, I need to talk to you. And he's like, you can speak English? And she's like, yes, but my husband doesn't know. And please don't tell him. And he's like, you are crazy. And she tells him, it's because of the watch that you're wearing that he, attacked you. And he's like, I found this 2 days ago, and why would I let a $20,000 watch go to waste? Mine was broke. And, basically she's saying, my husband was guarding it for my father, and it's a question of honor. And he's like, still, like, not sure what to make of all of it. Well, back at the caves, Charlie keeps trying to make excuses to, like, get away from Locke. Locke knows that he's been doing heroin and whatever, and he knows that he's in Drive Shaft. They had this conversation. It's like, yeah, I know who you are, blah, 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 and I believe you'll see your guitar again. And he's like, oh, yeah, why? And he says, do you want your guitar? And Charlie says, yeah, I do. And he says, more than your drug? And he's like, yeah. And so Locke asks Charlie to give him the last of his heroin, because he's like saying, like, if you quit now, it'll be on your terms. It's going to be inevitable because you're going to go through detox anyways. So he gives him the heroin, and he's like, look up, Charlie. And up on, like, the side of the hill, he sees his guitar case, and, like, Charlie starts to cry. Back at the beach, Michael comes up to Jin, and he's like, I know you don't understand me, but you better listen really good. And he takes off the watch and throws it at him, and is like, okay, I get it. I understand. It's about the watch. Just stay away from me and my kid. And he takes the axe, and he, like, cuts the chain, releasing Jin. So Jin's now got this handcuff permanently on his hand with a chain on it for, like, pretty much the rest of at least season 1, if I remember correctly.